Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State and beyond. Today, Ryan and I are going to be talking about summer birding and the nesting season, which has kind of been exciting for us because we have some nest box cameras out in place. And I know summer can be kind of a difficult time. You would think like, oh, summer is warm, there's going to be stuff everywhere, but it's a little bit different than what you might expect.
I hate summer birding.
Would you care to elaborate?
There's a lot of reasons to hate it. There's a lot of leaves in the trees, so seeing the birds is more difficult. It's really hot out, so it's just not pleasant to be outside anymore after such a nice springtime. And then the bugs are one of the biggest reasons I can't stand summer birding because if you go into one of those forests where those breeding birds typically are, you're going to get swarmed by mosquitoes, you're going to get ticks, you're going to end up being itchy.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to appreciate the nesting birds and also do some car birding or shoreline birding.
Shoreline birding is probably the
Yeah.
highlight. We always have that gull season, that late May, early June, gulls at the lakefront, find some rare gull species time of the year.
Yeah, I feel like it's been especially good for gulls because we've had a lot of little gulls on the lakefront. I think they got like a Great Lakes high count of lesser blackback gulls at Sheboygan a couple
It was
days
pretty
ago.
wild. And I was at
Yeah.
Sheboygan actually with Cole the other day, and there were still a ton of gulls out there. And I think someone said there could be as many as 10 species actually, which sounds a little crazy. But I know for sure we saw Franklin's there. We didn't see the little gull then that had been reported there, but it was also pouring rain. But we
I feel
did
like
see
every
tons
time
of
we go
lesser
to
blackback.
Sheboygan it's pouring rain.
Yeah, it's been a really rainy start to the summer so far.
Yeah, but the gull diversity has been great. Birding on the lakefront just feels nice in the summer because you got it's a little breezy. The bugs aren't bad. You
It's
got
not
the
as
nice
oppressive
scene.
as birding in the central part of the state.
Yeah, for sure. But last year we got a Nest Box camera, which is probably one of my favorite pieces of like birding technology or like bird related technology. So you can actually watch the birds build the nest and then raise the young. And so we had a family of house wrens that nested in one of our nest boxes with the camera. So we got to watch the whole process of them constructing the nest and then having the eggs, then the eggs hatching, and then the babies just kind of like growing up and leaving. So I feel like having that up close view makes you appreciate how much effort goes into the nest and raising the young than if you just kind of know a bird's in your yard and like, oh, it pops in and out, and then it had some kids, and it's just you appreciate it more.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see last year all the work that goes into it because you kind of know the birds put work into building the nest, but to see how long it took and how detailed it was, and then to know that they just do that pretty much every single year, make that new nest, it's kind of crazy to see the process. And it's really amazing to watch the chicks fledge too, because fortunately our wren succeeded in rearing all of the chicks. But there's a lot of perils out there for different young bird species. I mean, we were in Ohio and we saw a robin get snatched up by a fox snake. So there's plenty of perils out there for these nesting bird species.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that amazed me with the wrens is I thought we would see them leave the nest and they'd be hanging out in the yard and you'd be able to kind of watch them. Once they left, they were just gone. Like you would hear like every day we would hear the house wrens singing and there would be a lot of activity. We'd check the box camera, like all the babies were nestled in there. And then one day I checked it, they were gone. And I watched the video back and they all popped out. But there's just no house wren calling in the backyard. It's kind of like, man, they're just all gone. It happened really quickly.
You know, that seems like how it happens too, just in general. You know, you'll go into a forest around here and you'll hear hooded warblers and you'll hear chipping sparrows and you'll hear pine warblers. And then all of a sudden you go in there one day and there's just nothing. So the stuff doesn't waste any time heading out of town after they've successfully raised their young.
Yeah, and we kind of think of it as like, oh, they're hanging out, they're doing their thing. But I mean, instinct based, they're just like, yep, raise the young, on to the next thing. And this year it's been different because I was kind of hoping we would have the same wrens come back. I don't know how we would know because they're not banded or anything. But I was thinking we would have them come back and they would do the exact same thing. But it's been much different this year because I had cleaned the box out and around the same time there was just nothing. And it kind of makes you wonder like what's wrong with the nest box? Like why aren't they picking my place to have a family? And eventually one did come and investigate and started putting some sticks in there. So with house wrens, the males will start to build several nests, and then the female will ultimately choose which one she wants to finish and then have the young be raised. So we had a male checking it out, and I was kind of like, I was making sure the SD card was good, so I like popped it open when he wasn't around. And I saw that some wasps had started to kind of try to nest in there too. So I removed all the wasp nests. So I don't know if that maybe
You
had
do that
something
with
to
your
do with
bare
it.
hands where you just like
Yeah, there weren't
no
like
wasps in there?
wasps milling around, but it was
Hmm.
the material and stuff.
I sort of pictured you just going to town on a wasp nest with a bunch of wasps, and I was like, that is dedication.
Yeah, if you want a picture like that, you can. But I cleaned that out, and then the wren didn't come back. So I don't know if it was the activity of me like going in there and opening it, or if it was the wasps, or maybe the female didn't pick it. But I left everything in there, and now there's some more activity again. So we actually did a live stream on the Badgerland Birding Shorts channel to, hopefully get some ability of watching this for everybody, the wren building the nest. But they came around noon today and they were checking it out. And then I put the live stream on. I don't think they came the whole time the stream was on. So hopefully when we do that next, we'll have some more activity and hopefully they'll, finish the nest out and the wasps won't be a problem. And, it'll be good for everybody.
Well, you sort of have a personal goal now to try to get as many nesting birds on camera as possible.
I think it'd be really cool. So far we have Robin, which is an unreleased video so far, but we did
Wow,
get a
sneak
camera
peek.
up. Yeah, a little sneak peek. We did get a camera up a little far away on some robins, and then working on a couple other species. But it's just neat to have that inside look. Like it's so fascinating. I feel like it'd be a great thing for a school group to have a nest to watch, but then you do worry about like what if there's a snake that gets in there, there's some big predation event. I feel like that could be kind of scarring as well if you had some big thing happen. Maybe just
Yeah,
watch
exactly.
our house run time lapse one because you know that they made it.
That's true. I mean, I do have that fear of on live stream, all of a sudden some predator comes and you just see the live stream blowing up while you're not around, like, oh my gosh, like a cowbird's in there, a snake's in there, something that just seems like it would be scarring to everybody involved who follows it.
Yeah, one thing I liked about the Green Backyard nest box was it had the metal opening that you could change the size of it. So we basically last year when we set it up, I wanted house runs. I was like, it'd be cool to have a nest of house runs. So we picked like the smallest opening they had, I think. And so then house sparrows shouldn't be going in there. You can at least limit some predators. Like I'm sure snakes could get in if they really wanted to, but I feel like around by us, we don't have a lot of snakes that'll go into the actual house. Like we're not in that type of habitat, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, but still you would just worry about it. You know, whenever you put that out to the world, you have no idea what's going to happen on it. I'm always thinking about where I could put a nest box camera that would get some different species. It'd be cool to get, some house finches, some bluebirds. Some of the issues with it is that a lot of times you need to have that connection to the Wi-Fi in order to do it. And I would love to just put one out in the woods and see what happens, maybe get some chickadees, but that's not really possible.
Yeah, well, house finches, they're just cup nesters, right? I don't think they're cavity nesters.
I thought they were cavity nesters, house
I don't think
finches.
so. I think they
You
make a
sure?
cup nest. Pretty sure. Let's do a
I
little fact
swear
check.
there were nest box videos about house finches.
I think camera
Oh, you think they're
house
just on a
finch
nest?
nest. Yeah, I think so. Yep, it's a cup made of fine stems, leaves, rootlets, thin twigs, string wool, and feathers.
Does that mean it's not in a cavity though? Because
No,
prothonotary warblers make a cup nest in a cavity.
no, these look like they're just on ledges and things.
Interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah, so it's more like, like a robin's nest. It kind of looks, actually reminds me kind of like barn swallow nests,
I think that
some of
we have
these,
to
but
bring this up, Derek. Which bird, and I already know the answer, which bird is the shoddiest nest builder that you can think of?
no, definitely the doves, the mourning doves. I've heard some really bad stories. They'll have like three sticks and then they'll just lay eggs like next to it. So yeah, if you see a very poorly constructed nest, it may be a mourning dove. I think there was a video of a mourning dove that nested on somebody's like parked car too. Like
How long did they leave that car there
they
for?
had left, I think a while. It was in like a parking garage. And when they came back, there was like a dove nesting on it. I think they tried to do something where they kept it there, but I don't think it ended up succeeding.
That's too bad.
Yeah, but mourning doves, yeah, they make some bad nests.
Those are some bad mamma jammers, those mourning doves.
But some of the cool species to have, like I think Prothonotary warbler would be super cool to have a nest box cam on. I think Orioles would be really neat, but they make those hanging nests, so I
Yeah,
don't
that would
even
be
know
really
if that would be
tricky.
possible. That'd be
I
a
don't know either.
feat to get a nest camera on that.
What would be your holy grail of bird nest footage to get? Ivory-billed
Uh,
woodpecker doesn't count.
like resplendent Quetzal would be really cool because
What
I think
about
they're
like
cavity
Kirtland's
nesters.
warbler?
I mean, they're ground nesters. That could be
Right.
tough.
You'd have to mount that camera when you found that nest.
Can you imagine seeing a cowbird lay an egg in there then?
That would
It's
just
just
be
being like,
brutal.
oh,
Yeah, that would be terrible.
yeah. What would you pick?
Ooh, I feel like I have to think about this. I
I
think
just feel
that
like something like nuthatch would be cool.
nuthatch would be cool. I mean, I'm a big nuthatch fan. I'm assuming they're cavity nesters, right? I've never even thought
Yeah,
about it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see here. You know, what'd be neat would be a violet green swallow.
that would be cool. Really, anything that's like a would nest in a backyard that's cavity nester, I feel like you could.
I'm trying to think of things that don't nest in backyards too that would just be wild to get those views of. A northern spotted owl somewhere in the Pacific Northwest.
Man, yeah, I mean, any owl would be really cool. There are some. There's like screech owls that people have.
Yeah,
I'm
I
double
feel like
checking
you're
our
gonna use something
nuthatch
like that.
here.
Oh, you're double
Yeah,
checking
they look like
nuthatch.
cavity nesters.
I want to try to get some nuthatch footage.
I
That
so
would
I
be
think
pretty
I
sick.
actually know where a nuthatch nest is, but it's in a tree. But
You know, what'd
yeah,
be good
I'm
for
kind
me
of
too
surprised
is
they don't.
various woodpeckers, getting various woodpecker footage.
Yeah, 100%. Like I know our friends had like a northern flicker that started nesting in a cavity, but I think the house sparrows kicked it out. And
Uh,
that's tough with stuff like that because you can only like the nest opening has to fit the species. So if it's bigger than a house sparrow, it's really hard to control
here's
that
the
unless you do
question.
something like
Do you
you know,
want to
the
get footage
reflective
of a house
material.
sparrow nesting?
In Europe, I think it'd be
Ah, okay,
cool.
it's gotta be in
I'd feel
Europe.
kind of bad if I put a box up and then house sparrows were in it because somebody made the comment that like, oh, well, then you're, helping this non-native species that's then going to be aggressive to other species. It's like kind of like in a way, I guess you are, but at the same time, it's like they're going to find places to nest
You know, I
too.
have to point this out because I think it's funny and redundant. Every time we post anything about house sparrows, any videos about house sparrows, non-native species, there's always this person that comments. It's always a different person. It's a stream of consciousness thought that always has to have that one insight where they go, I think humans are the real invasive species. And
Yeah.
it's, you think about it and it's sure, yeah, that's true, but it's one of those pseudo-intellectual thoughts. How long has that been bouncing around in their head? And were they scared when they realized it? I'm the invasive animal here.
Well, there's also always the one that's just like, I love my house sparrows. They would never hurt anybody. They're not aggressive. It's
Well,
like,
every time we go back to talking about people's cats, because that's the comment with cats too, is little Chico would never hurt a fly. He's way too fat to even catch a bird.
well, here's a thought. If you did have a house sparrow nest cam, I wonder how much aggressive activity you would find. Like, would you see other house sparrows coming in and killing the chicks? Like, how bad would it get?
That's a good question. I remember at our parents' house, there used to be house sparrows nesting in the nest boxes that were put up, and we didn't know at the time much about ecology or house sparrows or anything. We just, they were our neighborhood birds that would nest in the boxes, and you would find dead babies on the ground sometimes under the nest box. And I don't know whether they were pushed out by rival sparrows or pushed out by the parents, but you would definitely find that, I presume, maybe more than you would other species that are a little less violent.
I think the people that I really feel for are when they put up like a bluebird house and they're watching these bluebirds grow up, and then you get the house sparrow predation. 'Cause it's like, man, like I put a home up for these. I've been watching them, grow up, and then bam, house sparrow. And like it's just that's tough.
And it sounds pretty brutal too.
Yeah, I'm really glad that our wrens, made it to adulthood and left the nest. I did feel a little sigh of relief, like, all right, they're out on their own. They made it. We've done as much as we could do, even though we did nothing but put up the box, but
Yeah, kind of
it was
holding your
pretty
breath
cool.
there.
Yeah, it was a neat experience though.
Every day you look, and I think you were counting them. I think I remember one day it looked like there were just six, and you were like, "Oh no, what happened? One's not there," and then it was just curled up, kind of
It
underneath the
was
other one.
really easy to get invested because you just like you have this insight into this world that nobody else can see. It's really neat. It was
I
really
was
fun to watch them.
surprised how stacked on top of each other they were.
Oh
Because
yeah.
when it started, that nest could accommodate those eggs well. And then when they hatched, they fit in there pretty well. But then eventually you'd see three of them, and the other ones would be underneath those three. And it's crazy too that the parents are able to find enough food to feed all of those babies. And
Yeah.
that's why they're up here, though, is because the food is so much more abundant. And then that spread of birds means that you're not having to compete for all of the same resources.
And the Wrens brought a surprising amount of spiders, it looked like, as food sources. Like I don't know where they were finding all these spiders, but
Probably
a lot of
searching
spider
tree
control.
bark.
Yeah. It was super neat. I'm hoping that they continue to use the box and we can do a live stream so people can check it out. I think that'd be really cool.
This is probably kind of cliched, but it kind of made the house feel more alive.
It
Having those
does.
nesting birds,
Yeah.
you just, oh yeah, the backyard's bustling with the sound of young wrens singing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, well, the same thing happened with the robin when it was ready to leave. It just, it left. Then it was silent. And it's like, okay, I guess that's it.
So I have a topic actually I'd like to discuss because you don't get our Wisconsin listserv, which is just emails that come through that people post emails about topics, and usually it's supposed to be bird sightings, but lately it's been the discussion of a silent spring, which is the idea that eventually there will be so few birds that you just will not have even the choruses of birds singing in the springtime. So a lot of people were commenting whether they thought that there was more birds, fewer birds, or the same number of birds this year than there was last year. And some people kind of compared this year to 10 years ago. And what
Like
are
they thought there was
your,
a lot.
well, some people said I've seen just as many, if not more, of certain species. And some people said I have unprecedentedly, is that even a word? The amount of,
An
the,
unprecedented amount.
yes, I have an unprecedented, well, that doesn't make sense either because I was going to say an unprecedented low amount. The amount of birds is unprecedented in the fact that it's so low. That's what I'm trying to get out.
I think we made it there.
We got to
Uh,
the point eventually.
well, I feel like I've been noticing it more. I don't know if it means that there is more, but we've also been doing a lot of song and call videos. So I've been really into bird songs and calls lately. So I feel like, and we have that haiku box out. So that's been alerting us to noises in the backyard too. For those that don't know, it's a thing you put up and then it tries to tell you what birds it's hearing in the backyard. So I feel like with that, I've been noticing more songs and calls, but I don't feel like the volume has been more than any other spring. But I'm sure it depends where you are and what's going on in your area.
So that's shifting baseline syndrome too, because you're going to compare to what the previous year was, not necessarily compare to 5 years ago per se. I Another thing that's hard too is the habitats change. So the place we used to go to see all our warblers has changed dramatically in Waukesha and now is no longer necessarily a viable place to go see warblers in the same way.
It is, but I feel like it's a lot harder.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that, it's not the same. You can't just wander through there. They cut habitat. There's other stuff going on down there. So that's a factor as well. I do think that there's some specific species that people don't see as much, but that could be a yearly difference too. It could just be abundance and then a little drop off. Because you could make the case with something like a snowy owl. 5 years ago or so, we had that snowy owl eruption. Maybe it was less than that, but we had a snowy owl eruption. And if you looked at that year compared to the next year, you'd say, man, the snowy owls are gone. There's no snowy owls. That must be a trend of their population. And that's not really the case.
It definitely does fluctuate, but I think the thing that I've noticed more than the birds themselves is just the amount of development. Because in areas where when we were growing up, there was a lot of wildlife and open field, and even just more caterpillars and insects now has been all developed. And you just realize that once that's gone, like it's probably not coming back. Like once an area is
Right.
housing, it's probably they're not going to clear it and plant a forest that's going to take 100 years to even grow
Yeah,
back
I
to
mean, I
somewhat the same
remember,
level.
and I know you remember, we used to, when we were kids, have our mom drive us down this road and it had field on either side, and we would just stop and collect all the caterpillars that would go across the road. It was a lot of the Virginia tiger moth, which is the banded woolly bear. And then also there were a couple of other species like, oh, what was it? Cattail caterpillars were
You'd
there
find like
too.
the yellow woolly bears too.
Yeah, you'd find yellow woolly bears. You'd find all sorts of stuff crossing the street. And now it's all suburban households. So you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And it just makes you wonder. Well, it bothers me too because there's areas to be developed that are abandoned. And then instead of renovating those, they'll pick a new spot. They're like, oh, let's turn this forest into housing. It's like, why don't you turn the other empty lot into
Why don't you
housing
turn
instead?
10th Avenue into legitimate housing?
It's just frustrating to see. And it feels like there's not much you can do, unless you have the money to buy up that land and turn it into a nature preserve or something. It feels kind of
Well, each business out
stuck.
there too is trying to run itself and, get money. So for example, the church that we belong to has donations that are down, so they're selling the land. They're selling some of the land and it's going to get developed. So it's not just the conservationists too that are having issues with it. It's just people trying to get by or businesses trying to get by that are selling off land too. So, it's tough because there aren't that many people really that have a conservation focused mindset when it comes to business stuff because it is more lucrative to sell the land than to hold on to it and conserve it. So I think it's something that everybody into birds and conservation is on the same side with, but it's something that's really hard to do anything about.
Well, I think it also is about protecting the critical habitat because if you have an area that's, say, Kirtland's warbler nesting jack pine, certain people are going to say that that's more valuable than just kind of like a, invasive species lot kind of deal. But at the end of the day, it's all kind of important, and you are going to limit the wildlife you have around if there's more concrete versus more, planted areas and materials.
And this is our announcement that we're becoming a land trust.
I would love to own a bunch of land and have people, manage it and do all that stuff. But it does make you wonder what it's going to take to see bird populations rebound. Or I've been seeing the same thing where they're like, oh, bird numbers of bird populations are down, numbers of fish are down. Like it just feels like everything's always down. We need
Not
some
ducks.
wins. Ducks
Waterfowl numbers are
apparently,
up.
yeah. But you do get a lot from the hunters, and sometimes people get on the case of birders, like, man, hunters do so much for conservation. Why aren't birders doing more? And to some degree, I feel like that's true. I feel like there is more that birders could be doing. I feel like a lot of the time they just don't know exactly what can be done or like where they could give money to a cause like that.
Yeah, something that has been successful is in some of those countries in South America where there's good birding, is the ecotourism has
Oh yeah.
taken away the need for land clearing and other practices that would make money. So now those places are able to subsist on ecotourism, which is really helpful. That's one way that's been beneficial. And you'd like to see that with more things. I think you could do that with things up here too. We were talking about the Kirtland's warblers. That land is managed, I think, by I don't know if it's the state government or the
Might be
federal government.
multiple organizations too.
But
Might
you
not
could
just be one.
probably find some way to make it so that people could go up there in a controlled manner and see the Kirtland's warblers and donate and things like that. Because I do think to a degree when this stuff is, I don't even want to say the Kirtland's warblers are gate kept because that's not really the right word. But when stuff is kind of gate kept or no one knows about it because you can't risk the habitat getting damaged or the birds getting bothered, you kind of miss an opportunity.
Yeah, it's just kind of weighing all those things, like what is better? Is it the experience? Having someone see Kirtland warbler, is that going to spark them to want to go into conservation, help conserve that species, or just is it just going to be like another tick on their checklist and then, they're just going to kind of move on. So it's kind of like what is that sighting worth? But I do feel like that's a iconic species people would be willing to donate to help the efforts for it. But one of the problems is people don't even know they breed in Wisconsin, which I think is they don't really want people to know or think about it. But if people did, maybe they'd be more
Forget
apt
that you
to
know about this
donate.
rare species.
Yeah. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, I don't think I have too much more to add on that. I feel like we lately have been getting into conservation stuff. All roads lead to conservation. I think it has been something that's at the forefront of everyone's mind lately.
Yeah, I would agree. And I feel like that is kind of the end goal. For a lot of organizations, like if you ask them like what is their goal, conservation is going to be part of that. Um, part of that mission statement. And it just kind of makes you sad to kind of see a downward trend. And I think most people wish they could do more. They just don't know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Keep your
I've
cat
seen,
inside.
I have a random fact for you. Well, it's not a fact, but you know Amy Tan?
Yeah.
So turns out one of my players that I coach is actually part of her family.
Really? That's
Yeah, so
funny.
she comes up to me today. She goes, "Do you know who Amy Tan is?" I said, As a matter of fact, I do." And she goes, "I'm having lunch with her tomorrow." And I was like,
Oh,
"Why?" She goes, "Oh, she's my mom's cousin or something."
well, that's cool.
It's totally random.
Yeah, I actually have her book right here. The Backyard Bird Chronicles, because we got to meet Amy Tan. We actually got to go on a woodcock walk with Amy Tan
That we did.
at the biggest week. So it was cool. Um, was, I believe, the number one on the New York Times bestsellers list as well. So she's been getting a lot of press just kind of chronicling the birds in her backyard. Wrote a book about it. Pretty cool.
So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's cool. And the more people can care about what's in their backyard, the more they're gonna want to preserve those habitats and
Like
help
their
those species
backyard.
out.
Preserve that backyard habitat.
Yeah, but we're kind of heading into what you and I refer to as the summer slump, where everything kind of slows down. And like you were saying, you don't really have the drive to go out as much. And I feel like if you were doing it like a state big year, this is where things could kind of fall off because there's not necessarily a ton of new things to see all the time, which I think is good for us because we have a ton of videos to edit. So maybe it's good that we're not going to be getting out all the time to see new things.
Yeah.
Um, but it definitely feels like we're kind of, migration's more or less over in our area. So it's kind of like breeding birds, coastal birding, gulls, trying to avoid the mosquitoes and the heat.
Yeah, I remember when I did my sort of big year, which was kind of an unintentional big year that then halfway through I was like, might as well just try to do this thing. Summer was when I just did not feel like going out. It was spring that was crazy. You're out all the time, more than you should have. You're missing work for stuff. And then summer hits and you kind of are burnt out. And then rare stuff gets reported, but it's a huge pain to see. So a swallowtail kite seen somewhere in the most northeastern tip of the state and it passes by twice a day at random times. Do you really want to go see that? I did not want to go see that. So I think I missed like 10 birds I could have gotten in summer because rare stuff still does show up and people are still out there finding it, but it's harder to nail down. And sometimes it's breeding out there too.
Yeah, I feel like there comes a point where you'll be going after something that's crazy difficult to see. It'll be a bird you've already seen in your life, so you don't need it as a lifer. And you reach this point where you're just like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I driving 5 hours to see this bird I've already seen? Like, is it worth
Right.
it? Is this really, just adding this to the list for the year? Like, is this really the best use of my time? I feel like that's kind of the tough thing. Not that I've done like a real true state big year or anything, but I kind of tried to see when I was down in Louisiana how many I could get in a year. And so I ended up in some of those situations. But that was tough because I would leave to come back to Wisconsin. So that kind of, you miss a lot doing that. But you do end up in those situations where you're like, man, is this really the best use of my time?
Hmm. Right. Well, is doing a big year the best use of one's time in general? Maybe.
Well, if you're like Aryan Dwarshuis, when he did his global big year, he raised a lot of money for conservation too.
True.
So that was
So it
kind of
was worth
like
it for him.
that was kind of his offsetting, I'm doing all this travel, but I'm also raising all this awareness and money for conservation. So
Basically, going back to what I was saying, if anyone out there has some land that they want to donate to us and make us into a land trust,
I believe
we'll accept
Tim
it.
Hahn would be interested in managing some land based on our conversation we had with
I
him
bet that he would
on the
love to be a land
podcast.
manager. Very trustworthy guy that we could get to manage a nice piece of land for us.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on summer birding. Summer, I do feel like summer is a great time to travel to other places you've never been though, because you'll see the local breeding birds, but if you haven't been there, they're all new for you. So it can be a good time. Maybe go someplace a little cooler, if you're in a really hot area. But would love to hear your thoughts on summer birding, kind of how the spring was and what you're up to this summer if you have any nesting birds in your backyard. Anything else to add about the summer?
Have fun out there if you want. I think a lot of people decide that they'd rather go to the beach, go out on the lake, do some fishing or
Why go to the
something.
beach when you could go to the landfill and look at gulls?
The smelly summer landfill is definitely a mood that I don't really need in my life right now. So
Yeah, but could be a good time. So,
could be a good time. Maybe a nice date location for you and the lady.
hey, if you guys are birders, finding some rare gulls.
The bold first date location.
It's a bold first date location, yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.